Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited for the Global Homeschooling Summit to bring you Anna Brown. Hi, Anna.
Hello, good morning.
So as a brief introduction, Anna lives in Virginia with her husband, David. Their two daughters are in their 20s and were always unschooled. She has been very active in the unschooling and consensual living spaces for many years. And now she's a host and the community advocate in the Living Joyfully Network, a new online unschooling community. Today, Anna is here to talk with us about the importance of choice to unschooling. That's really a foundational idea. But just to get us started, can you share a bit about you and your family and how your choice to unschool came about?
Sure. So as you said, we have two girls. They are 20 and 22 at the moment. David and I have been together for over 30 years. So we were teens way back then. Our oldest is married and she lives about 25 minutes from us. And our 20-year-old is currently with us during this kind of global uncertainty. And as things clear up, we're kind of excited. She's excited to see what will be next for her and where her journey will take her. So our journey to unschooling was really driven by our oldest. She was hospitalized for 2 months after her birth, and we took her home with some really grave predictions and just a really difficult time. And we were just so happy to be out of the hospital and be with our baby. And we joke that she did not get the dire prediction memo, and she began speaking before she was 1 and in full sentences by 18 months. And she was so curious and interested in the world around her. And she dealt with and still does some physical limitations, but even watching her figure out how to do the things she wanted to do in light of some of those limitations was just amazing. We were in awe of her always. And so fast forward to she's 3 years old and she's super interested in bones at this point. And so I had to actually get a college textbook to get her the level of detail and proper medical names that she wanted for all of the bones. She knew them all. And so we're on a playground and she meets this little boy on this bridge structure. So like they're kind of on this bridge and I'm standing next to it. So my head's kind of right at their feet where they're talking. And she points to his chest and she said, "That's your sternum." And he looks down and he's like, "No, that's a triceratops," because he has the dinosaur shirt on. And so this really intense argument ensues where she's telling him, "No, that's your sternum and it's connected to your blah, blah, blah." And he is super adamant, like, "Look, lady, you don't know your dinosaurs at all. This is a triceratops." And oh my gosh. So we managed to like get that and calm everybody down. But on the way home, I was just reflecting that kindergarten's still 2 years away and she already knew her colors and numbers. And she really just demanded to dive deep into the things that she was interested in. Like her passions just carried all of us into these interests. And I just knew they were things that weren't on a kindergarten curriculum. And I knew that environment wasn't going to work for her. So I started to look into options and I found homeschooling and someone gave me the Well-Trained Mind. So this is a very classical approach to homeschooling. And I read it and I thought, okay, if this is what I need to do, I'll do it. Because, here we'd been through so much with her health and with all these things. And we're just honestly grateful for every moment we had with her. And I was like, I'll do whatever she needs to do to thrive. But thankfully, very soon after that point, I read John Holt's Learning All the Time. So this is one of his small books. But it was just one giant aha after the next. Watch your child, see how they're learning all the time, see how they learn to walk and talk and crawl. And of course, here I am with a 3-year-old who knew all the bones in the body and every insect in the yard. And so I knew she could learn. Like that wasn't even a question. So everything he said made sense. And I realized I just needed to not be the roadblock to her learning, by hijacking it or by putting her in an environment where her natural curiosity would not be welcomed. I mean, it can't in that environment. But I could be this facilitator and this partner, and we could explore together. And that felt so much better. This idea of the structure and the teacher and the top down just didn't resonate with me and the relationship I already had with her. And so this idea that we could be partners exploring the world together and that her passions could lead us just like they've been leading us, these first 3 years, oh, I loved it. And it just allowed me to see her for who she is. And I loved that. And so our second daughter was probably about 1 at the time that this was happening, because they're just a little bit less than 2 years apart. And she's this completely different child, completely different interests and physicality and all these different pieces. But that she benefited so from me learning this early on, and because I could see her and allow her to be who she was and be this facilitator. Whereas I think when you have this kind of one recipe for learning, they would both have had to fit into that classical curriculum. And I can tell you right now, looking back, it would not have worked. So, and really at this, once we kind of saw that, and it's really naturally how my husband learns, we just never looked back. It was so clear to both of us how much they were learning and how amazing this life of exploration together could be. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
That's a beautiful, beautiful nutshell. I could hear that story over and over and over. It gives,
and you do.
But when you think about unschooling as a parent, as the role of being a facilitator, I really love that, because it really does bring in the idea of choice, right? So as we're coming to it and we're starting to explore that whole idea of choice, we might be thinking like, it's like, yes, I can understand how I'm going to support my child this way and choose all the different things that they can learn about, and we're going to follow their interests. But when we start to think bigger picture about our days, it can feel for the parents like we don't have a lot of choice, right? So much of our days can feel like one obligation after another. I need to do this and I need to do this. So it really can be quite eye-opening, and I think really empowering for parents to try on the idea that there is always a choice. Like at first it's like, can that really be true? Is everything really, really a choice?
I know. And you know how passionate I am about that idea. And it really does meet with some resistance. But I've found that understanding that everything is a choice has been so transformational for me in so many different arenas. So I really will just keep talking about it, because we tend to use this language in our culture, this language of have tos, and we really do it quite offhandedly. It's, we have to go to the store, we have to brush our teeth, we have to go to school, we have to do the dishes. And when we use that kind of language all the time, I just feel it's insidious. It creates this environment where we really start to believe we don't have choices. And that weighs on us. That is a weight that we carry around, and it really impacts how we see ourselves and our lives and just our day to day. So I feel like if we can peel that back a little bit, we can see that we don't have to. So we're going to the store because we want some food for dinner. We don't have to go. We can make do with what we have on hand, but we choose to go maybe because we want some more interesting options, or if there truly isn't anything at home, we could go out to eat. We don't have to go to the store. So it's just, there's always choices. Just to take that idea of have to off just frees you to be like, yeah, but no, I really want to go to the store because we wanted to have hamburgers for dinner, or we wanted to have some extra fresh veggies or whatever. Same with teeth. We don't have to. We may want to take care of our teeth by brushing them, but we could also find other ways to take care of our teeth if brushing isn't working, or we can examine that idea altogether. Always choices. And of course, my kids never went to school, so we know that's not a have to. And the dishes, we might want the dishes, I'd like to do the dishes because I like a clean sink, or to have the dishes clean for dinner. But the reality is, if I don't want to, let's use paper plates. Hey, let's go out tonight. I'm not in the mood to deal with the kitchen, and nobody else is in the mood to deal with the kitchen either. Always choices. But that, I think you can feel the lightness of that energy shift from, I've got to do the dishes, or we're not going to be able to eat, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, is that really true? Kind of examine those when you feel yourself stuck in a have to. Really step back and examine, is that true? Do I really have to? And I think when you're like, nope, I'm choosing to, feels completely different. Completely different. It just, something happens when you realize you have that choice. That energy just shifts instantly. You feel empowered to do the thing because you're choosing it. And you realize that the choice you're making, maybe because it's going to make something easier or faster or more pleasant, whatever that reason is, then that helps you kind of clue into why you're doing it. So that's, that's helpful information as opposed to just keeping it at this one level. And you also might, when you realize that you don't have to do something, you may realize, I don't want to. And that's okay too, because there you're learning about yourself. You're learning like, I really don't want to do this. And so we need to find a different solution. And so I think all of that is just really important work to help you be present in the moment and in your life and not feeling you're being dragged along, that, that you're the one empowered to make your choices. I think there's another next step too that I'll just briefly to think about where the have tos are coming from. So typically it's outside of ourselves. It could be from families or in-laws or the culture at large. And so identifying that can help you put it into perspective, and it helps you to hone in on your own internal guidance, because really it's pretty, there are no have-tos. And so if you're experiencing a have-to, it's probably coming from somebody else. And if it's coming from inside of you, even examine that. Why am I feeling that? Where's that coming from? And then all of this, again, is just really great information to hone in on your own internal voice and your own internal guidance. And I think it's honestly key to kind of living your best life, and creating this environment where you can thrive and your family can thrive. So a lot there, but yeah, those are kind of my thoughts about that.
Yeah. Well, I love that piece. That it really is so valuable to be able to understand yourself and to start to hear those messages, because when we live on that have to level, it's almost like we just live on that shell outside where we're just kind of bribing or guilting ourselves into doing all these things. Because that was such a great point you mentioned earlier too. So often we think at that level, if we take away the have to, then we're not going to do it. Right? But no, that hasn't been my experience either. When you dig into it a little bit more, you see the reasons why. Like it became a have to, maybe because of the reasons or because of voices. That's why it's so valuable to see where that have to is coming from. But then to get to that deeper level, to realize why you would choose to do this in the moment, the energy is completely different when you approach whatever the act is that way, right? It's just empowering, like you said, and to be able to, it really is. And then you hear all those voices inside you, those messages that are truly your own. Once you clear off the weight of all the other messages that you've absorbed, and to really see why, and you really just feel like you are living, like you said, your best life, because you're living your choices and you're understanding why you're choosing that. So let's take that idea of choice and look at it through the lens of our children now, right? Because that's how you guys have been living your life now, well, for 20 odd years. So how have you seen that choice, that ability to choose, that freedom to choose play out with your kids?
Well, I think as we observe our children making choices, we see the value of those experiences. When they make choices, they're following their internal guide, not just doing what they're told or what's expected. It's coming from inside of them. So that's a window into our kids, which I love. And even when there are bumps or, they want to turn around and that's not the decision they want, they just take that in as information and they move on and they learn more and they grow. And that process is so valuable. And it gets short-circuited when we jump in with directions or demands or expectations. The focus, when it's external like that, we lose the connection with our internal guide, and it becomes about trying to measure up or to please someone else. And it really shuts down who we are. It becomes about the observer instead of about the learner. And that's just, it's really interesting to see that play out when you allow them and allow an environment and create an environment where you all can be coming from this internal guide instead. I think it's just really one of the cool gifts of unschooling, and how our children can experiment with making choices and learning from things when it doesn't work. There isn't the baggage and a fear associated with being wrong or doing the wrong thing. And I think that it can be instilled in us when we're in school. And so here we have this safe environment to explore. And I would argue that only in a safe environment can we truly learn, truly find flow, explore without the weight of external expectations. And so this is just an opportunity when we can step back and watch, because children are going to naturally do this. Like, they're going to naturally make decisions from their internal guide, because it's only when we start putting this stuff on them over the years that that internal guide gets pushed down. So this is such a great opportunity to step back and watch and learn, because a lot of us have to unlearn some of this, unlearn that it's okay to make, we can learn that it's okay to make mistakes, and we can learn that we don't have to be fearful about that. And so I think it's a powerful gift, and it's a healing for us as well.
Yeah. I think that's such a great point, because when we are, when you think about the choices that they're making, and when we are bringing ourselves, it's like us imposing have-tos on them, and we just work through for ourselves how detrimental those how-tos are for us figuring out who we are, what we like to do, how we tick, what our strengths, what our challenges are. Like, that level of self-awareness is so important over a lifetime, and it is so wonderful to see it develop with our kids. And yeah, I had that same experience too. I looked to them so much during that, those first few years when we began unschooling, because they, even though my kids were in school for a few years, my oldest anyway, like, they were pretty able to unshackle all that, because they were chomping at the bit. It's like, this is just slowing us down, right? And that whole piece about being willing to make mistakes, like, mistakes isn't a word in our language, really. It's just like, it's more information. The other piece I wanted to bring up when we're talking about kids and choices that I think can stop people up when they're first learning about unschooling is the idea of, you were talking earlier of the have-tos, right? The have-tos about teeth and sleep and that kind of stuff. It can be the have-tos about academics. So, well, they have to learn reading, and then it's okay. Or they have to do some math, and then it's okay. So the really interesting piece for me through unschooling, giving them the choice, people can be worried, well, then they won't come up reading. But the beautiful thing is, right, that it's not about the skill. They're going to have choices. They're going to pursue things that are naturally going to ask them to engage with the skill. So it's not about learning reading. It's not about learning math. But as they pursue their real interests, their choices, they really do come up against all these things that just naturally exist in our society, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I love that piece. Okay, so now let's move on to the family and the relationship piece, because I find this to be really fascinating. So when we're embracing choice as a family, this quickly leads us to a different kind of parenting style, doesn't it? Because if we're not imposing have-tos, which really, when you think about it, that is trying to control another person, right? And so often conventional parenting wisdom that we hear and absorb and may have experienced is all about, in the goodness of their heart, trying to control kids to become, some sort of vision of the child that they want to have, or to, grow, right, as a parent. But it can be really hard, I think, when you're starting to understand, okay, I don't want to control them. I don't want to pile on a bunch of have-tos in our relationship. But what are you going to do instead, right? I think that becomes a really valuable question for parents to ask.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest differences I've seen is just conversations. So we have conversations about things. We're truly listening to one another. We don't hand down any have-tos. We talk about our options. We ask for opinions. We share what's working for us and our needs, and while we're listening to their needs. And I'm truly not under the illusion that I can control anyone but myself. Like that, I learned really early on. And honestly, I found I don't want to control another person. I want to see the person in front of me, hear them, work with them. That's the person that I want to be. And so letting go of that illusion of control, because it is an illusion, gives way for collaboration and partnering to take the front seat. And I think those skills are so valuable at all stages of our life. So it was really a priority for me to model that and to work through that for myself and to have, this collaborative model. We all just worked together as a family to make sure that everyone was getting their needs met. And, sometimes people will balk at that piece. They think that takes too much time. I don't want to deal with that. I don't have time with it. But the reality of it is that conflict takes time too. And in my opinion, it's a much less pleasant way to be spending our time than working together towards a solution, which can actually be fun. And at the very least, it's less charged and it maintains our connection and we learn more about each other. And that's the extra benefit of these conversations really, is that we're getting to know each other, our likes, dislikes, preferences, personalities, our needs, all of it. And that information, as we're learning about each other, makes future conversations easier. We get to solutions faster because we understand each other and we know, oh yeah, that piece doesn't work for them, but this piece works for them. And they're going, oh yeah, but you don't like that. But maybe I could have dad take me to this thing because I know it's too many people for you, or, this type of thing. And that creativity and that connection and that understanding each other just fosters this environment where those are not charged conversations at all. It's very matter of fact, like, well, I need to do this, but that's butting against what you need to do. Okay, well, let's figure out this, because we know that we trust. And so that's, just another big piece of it.
Yeah, I love that, because the point about how conflict also takes up time, right? Because you think, okay, you're just like, as a parent, I'm telling you, you need to do this, but that ripples. Like, how long do you spend trying to convince them you need to do this? Come on, we need to go right now. Come on, let's get out the door. There's just, that just takes up so much time that we don't even recognize because we're so focused on getting the thing done, right? Or maybe we're looking at our watch and going, oh, we're late. Right, and then
how does that change the energy going forward? So even if you get them in the car at that moment, is everybody grumpy for the next hour for the whole outing because of that exchange?
Exactly. Like the ripple effect over time of that, when you look at that time that negative interaction has impacted your family, that's a huge piece of time. And when you can think of replacing that with just another way to engage with them, and as you say, that ripples out, because, right, what have you learned in that negative confrontation? You've just learned that one thing needed to be done. We need to be out the door. We need to be out the door. You're learning nothing about the people involved. There's no increasing self-awareness. There's nothing in there that's going to help you next time. Right? When you're trying to.
And they're not learning about you. They're not learning about the why you're so attached to this idea of us leaving right now, or why you even want to go to the place that we're wanting to go. And so those whys, like why we're driven to do something, when we can be transparent about that and explore that with each other, it makes relationships so much deeper and more connected, and just, it's so much easier.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so now let's take that. And that idea you were talking about trusting choices, trusting our kids' choices. Then the parents will come up to a time when their kids are making a choice that they're more uncomfortable with. It is easier to trust choices when you're happy with them. That's digging into your definition of trust, right? So I'd like to talk about those moments when our children are making choices that are different than the ones we would make if we were in their shoes, right? Because we're our own person, they're a different person. Why is it so valuable when it comes to unschooling to be able to do that? And what does that look like in action?
Well, I feel like trust is probably one of the most important pieces in unschooling because it's about trusting your children, trusting in their journey, trusting their choices, like we're talking about. And that can be tough because typically when a choice arises, we tend to put ourselves in their shoes, which really means that we think about the choice that's in front of them and what we would do if we were facing it. But that really just isn't so helpful because they aren't us. And so I love how you have turned that around to say to look through their eyes. So seeing the decision in front of them through their lens and not your own. So with the relationships that we were just talking about that we're building, you learn so much about each other. And so this becomes easier to understand how they're seeing the decision. But really, the first step is to trust their decision. Be a sounding board if they need it. Take your cue from them about the support that they need for that decision, but try to keep the view through their lens always, like not putting how you would feel onto it. Think about, I'm here as a sounding board, I'm listening to what they're saying, and I'm thinking about who this child is in front of me and what I know about their likes and dislikes and the way they process information and the way they do things. And so I can help them, ask questions that may be relevant to them, versus looking at it from my shoes. And you'll learn so much more about them. And I think you'll understand the how and why they're making the decisions they are. And I think that's important because, like you said, we can have this kind of snap reaction to a decision that we don't understand because we wouldn't make that same decision. But with this process of really looking at it through their eyes, listening to them about their process and thinking about how they're making this decision, then we can see the why. Then we see this thread as to how they got to that decision. And it's so valuable because the thing is, as humans, we want autonomy. We do. And unschooling creates this safe environment of exploration. And through that exploration, our children can grow and develop and figure out who they want to be in the world. And I love that it can happen from that place of a supportive family, because I think often what we see happen is this is going on when in our 20s. And things are so much more intense. So you've had 20 years of being told what to do, when to do, how to do, what to think, and now you're trying to figure out who you are in this bigger picture. But at the same time, you're supporting yourself, you're moving out into the world, you're potentially in relationships, it's so stressful. And so I love, love, love that unschoolers get to explore all of that and who they want to be in the world with time and space and a supportive family around them. And that's not to say that there is not stress during that transition to adulthood, because there is, but it takes that element out of it. And they've had so much time to explore and figure out, how do I make decisions? Because right there, if you've been told what to do your whole life, even figuring out how to make decisions in your 20s and 30s can be challenging. And so, I love that our kids are making decisions all along, from the little things to what jacket to wear and what sippy cup to use, to the big things. What relationship do I want to be in? What state do I want to live in? What type of job am I interested in doing next? And so when it gets to those kind of bigger, high risk decisions or bigger intensity decisions, they have all this foundation of making choices and with support, but really trusting that internal guide, because the bottom line is we're not going to be there for all those choices. So us telling them what to do or directing them isn't helping them figure out who to be as adults. And I think there's many adults out there that can look at themselves at 40 and 50 and whatever and say, yeah, it's taken me a long time to get to where I really know what inside, how to make decisions that I want to make. How do I make decisions that help me live my best life? And so it is one of the many amazing gifts of unschooling, for sure.
Yeah, and I love your focus on the supportive family and the conversations, right? Because when you don't take that piece, as we were talking about earlier, what do I replace that control with? If you really just take away the control and kind of leave them on their own, I mean, yes, they're going to figure stuff out eventually, but it's going to be more painful. It's going to take longer, and it's just a completely different atmosphere when everybody is connected and helping each other. I'm sure you've experienced too, how much do our kids help us? How much value? Children are so capable, so much more capable than we conventionally give them credit for. So when you have that time and space to develop those relationships, it really becomes supportive of each other, like them just as much of us. Like it's not a one-way kind of parent to child relationship. It really becomes everybody working together, doesn't it? Right? So I just want to take, for our last question here, just to walk through a little bit about those kinds of conversations that we might have with our kids as challenges arise. When we know and we trust that together we really can find a solution that is going to work for everybody. Because that is, I think that's a really big stumbling block, because that is so hard to imagine when you first start looking at this kind of transitioning parent-child relationship, right?
Yeah. And, typically for me, it starts with listening, so it's quieting because, we want to jump in with the solution or with the, this is what's happening or this is whatever. So listening, step back, mouth closed, listening. I never want to rush to judgment or come into a situation thinking that I know what's going on. So that helps me, like, come in there, clean slate, listen, hear what's happening. If someone is upset, validation is the key. That's the first place I go when I see that someone's upset. This deep, radical validation of whatever is being presented. Even if, I would say especially if it's a hurt or an angry emotion, it needs to be heard and given space. Everyone needs to feel heard in order to move to any higher level thinking, like problem solving. And if not, we just really stay stuck in this defensiveness. And I'm sure we can all think of times when we've been there ourselves. But if we feel heard, we can relax. We no longer need to be defending or explaining our case. They've heard us. And that gives us just enough of an opening to let other ideas and options in. Because when we're still in that mode of having to defend and explain, we're not even hearing what the other person is saying because they're not hearing us. And if you don't, then you're just going to keep talking. And so I'm not going to go deep into the 90-second rule, but quickly, it's basically the physiological process by which emotions and feelings move through our body, and that it takes 90 seconds. This is a physiological phenomenon. And we can use that to understand and feel those feelings for 90 seconds, give them space, and then watch for that opening to make a new choice. And so understanding that piece along with this listening and validating can really help us move through kind of charged situations. And, back to trust again, it takes time and practice to develop this trust, especially if things have been handled differently in the past. We do have to build that trust up, but children want to work in partnership. Just like you saw with your kids, they'd had this school experience, but they were ready to take charge and be responsible for their own decisions. And in that same way, we want to live in community and in relationship with each other. And children want that. Absolutely. Everyone wants to be heard. So soon, this new way of approaching problems, if it's new for your family, becomes known, then there's this trust that they're not trying to thwart me and I'm not trying to thwart them. And they know that not only that, but I want to help them get their needs met. They view me as a partner in that. They don't view me as an obstacle. And that's really important to me. I don't want to be an obstacle to anyone. I want to be someone that's supportive. And so that just keeps everyone in the space of figuring out how to make things work. So when we don't feel heard, or if we don't believe someone's trying to help us, that's when we really dig into and become stuck. We're going to dig into this one idea of how it is because you're not hearing me and this is what I'm going to want to do. But, I think that we can see when someone hears us, it's like, okay, then I'm willing to listen to them. They've heard me, and it just kind of opens up this conversation. And so as another example, if I've requested something and everyone's not okay with it, then again, my first space is to go to listen, not to push. No, we have to. No, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to listen. Okay, so I can state my need because that's important in the situation as well. And then I can hear their needs and then we can go from there. And I think it's important to keep in mind that sometimes on the surface, you'll have these very two opposing positions. And it doesn't seem like, well, how are we ever, you want to go, they don't want to go. How is that going to work? But once you start peeling back the layers for the needs, then you can find that common ground to open up solutions. Well, I really want to go do this. I don't want to go, but then it's because I'm in the middle of this thing and I want to finish it. Oh, well, okay, I can wait 15 minutes. That's not a big deal. But if we stay at this, no, we have to go, we lose that opportunity for understanding what's behind it. And why do I have to go? I can explain that. And then they can understand, oh, your thing's time sensitive too. Okay, well, let's figure out this piece or whatever. And so, and I guess that kind of leads me to, I think it's important for parents to know that we don't have to have all the answers. Just like Pam was just saying, our kids are amazing problem solvers. They have so much to contribute if we will just listen and create an environment where that is welcomed. And I think as adults, we can sometimes have these ideas about what's fair or right, and we can get attached to that. And I found that I really need to set that aside. And when we're looking at needs, so much more opens up. And kids are just creative. They're capable and they're creative. Period. I'm just going to say it again. Kids are capable and creative. They come up with solutions that, one, would have never occurred to me. And two, they might not even be things I understand. Like, I'm thinking in my head, how is that the solution to this? Like, how does that feel okay? But yet it does, because it's meeting their needs, because they're communicating. So if it's a sibling disagreement, they can come to an agreement about the TV or about, or whatever that may not make sense to me, but they're happy with it. So I just am fostering an environment where we can have conversations, where we can kind of dig in and know that we can come to a solution, because I have just seen there's always a solution when we work together, and it may not be right in that moment. We may, this person may defer or that person may defer, but we're doing it from a place of we're working together and we're trusting that everyone wants to get everyone else's needs met. So it doesn't feel like a deferral is a defeat. It feels like a choice, because you're going, yeah, my thing can absolutely be delayed till tomorrow, but their thing really can't. But I know that it'll be a priority tomorrow. I know that it's not going to get pushed aside. And so that trust that we're all working together is what gets us to the place of finding and creating solutions. And so I love that, because I feel like, we come in with judgment. And so I would say, just again, hold that judgment back and be aware if you are coming into a situation with a set outcome in mind. So if you think it's going to go a certain way or should go a certain way, definitely set that aside, because, people will surprise you with what their priorities are and needs, because we can't see into them internally. So it's that openness to be able to have conversations. And so, and the openness just reminds me, go into all the discussions with that open, curious mindset that Pam talks about and that we talk about so much. Where's this going to lead? What makes sense next? What new information am I going to be learning by listening? And when you have that open and curious mindset, so many paths open up. And so I think that's the key when we're talking about, like, practically, how does that work? It's listening and it's being open and curious. Even if you just kept those couple things in mind, I think you'll see these other things start to unfold. But that's the first place, because we have to shut that noise off and stop those outside voices and just listen to the person in front of us and be open and curious about how is a situation going to unfold. And that energy is so different from the energy of coming in with, it has to go this way, we have to do this, we have to do that. I mean, you can just, me saying that, I can feel the weight of it, versus, wonder how this is going to work out. Okay, well, I'm needing this, you're needing that. Like, it's just this fun, light, creative energy. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't have intense discussions. We will. No, I want to do this, or you want to do that. But that's okay. Intense discussions are okay, because everybody's trusting that we're all partnering together. There's not a door, an obstacle of something that we have to buck against.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, it is such a whole different way of approaching our conversations, isn't it? When we going back to, there's always a choice. Right? Oh, I love it. Thank you so much, Anna. I really appreciate sharing your experience around your unschooling and your approach, and the importance and the value of having choice in every moment. It really is there. And it truly doesn't take as much energy as you think, before, when you're first getting started, and what you gain from having those kinds of relationships and that connection with your child. Like you said, children are so capable and creative. It's amazing to watch, isn't it?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Thanks, Anna.